So, with arms being better this season, it does a ton of damage. Fury with AM Ravager is still kind of close, but I think arms just takes the cake. In terms of single target and AoE will probably be the meta thing to play in keys. Arms AoE rotation is a complete fucking mess. It is an absolute fucking travesty. Because when we look at our AoE, we actually have a lot of AoE buttons. We have Warbreaker, we have Cleave, we have Overpower, we have Whirlwind, we have Thunderclap, and we have Sweeping Strikes to consider. With all of these. So we get in this very weird and fun scenario where it's like, okay, well, here's our AoE. Our AoE is okay, here's the simple way to look at it, right? Mortal Strike, 86k. Cleave, 33k. Okay, 2 targets, Mortal Strike, 3 targets, Cleave. That's how you're going to do the most damage, right? But if you have Sweeping Strikes up, now Mortal Strike hits 2 targets. Okay, so how do we do this? So by doing the math, at 5 or less targets, Mortal Strike with Sweeping Strikes up does more damage than Cleave at 5 targets, but at 6 targets, Cleave does more damage than Mortal Strike. Okay, so now we have a Sweeping Strike conditional, but where does Whirlwind fit into play? Well, Whirlwind does 75 damage to everything, right? So even if we have 2 stacks of Martial Prowess, it is still going to do more damage if we are using Sword of Storms than if we are using Cleave. Now, this becomes an even bigger mess when we try to attribute Fervor of Battle into our rotation. Because now, with Fervor of Battle, we have to attribute, okay, Whirlwind does 26k damage, but it now does 45k additional damage if it has at least 2 targets. But if you have Sweeping Strikes up, that slam hits 2 targets instead of just 1. So now we have to go, okay, well, what the fuck is my rotation? Because now we're looking at Juggernaut, we're looking at Fervor of Battle, and all of these different conditionals are a complete fucking mess. So, oh god, it's at a, like, I don't even know the exact calculations, because I would have to calculate at how many targets is it better to press Whirlwind with a slam that cleaves 2 additional targets with Sweeping Strikes up than it is to press Overpower and Mortal Strike. But because we also have to remember that Overpower isn't just a single target ability. With Dreadnought, Overpower does a lot of damage. As an example, let's build some Rage. So, on these targets, it hit all 5. We'll hit all 5 with Cleave. We'll hit 1 with Mortal Strike. We'll hit a Thunderclap. With Fervor of Battle, we'll hit 1 Whirlwind, and then we'll hit 1 Overpower. Now, there is crit RNG and Cleave RNG, but this is what our overall looks like, right? Right now, we can see between Dreadnought and Overpower, it is doing slightly more damage than Whirlwind. But Whirlwind also casts a 95 crit Cleave. So now that means that Whirlwind is doing more damage at 5 targets than Overpower does. But Overpower is also buffing Cleave by an X amount of percent. Cleave did 148k, whereas Mortal Strike did 86k, bringing the 5 target, 3 target thing. And this is only because Mortal Strike crit. Cleave, only part of their hits crit. If Cleave crit, the same as Mortal Strike, then it would be doing more damage. But you see how this is a mess. This is a complete and utter fucking mess, where the amount of conditionals required to play this properly, I don't even have the correct math. One of the reasons why I'm not playing for Battle currently, which has the potential to do more overall damage, and I'm playing Juggernaut instead, is because Juggernaut is way simpler to play. Because in Juggernaut, it's pretty simple. In AoE, you debuff everything with Warbreaker, then you send your 2 charges of Overpower, then you Cleave, then you Whirlwind, and then you're just sending Cleave as much as you can when you fill in the spaces with Thunderclap to spread bleeds, and you're chilling. But with Fervor of Battle, you're like, okay, How many targets am I at? How many is this at? Is sweeping strikes up? How many cleaves am I hitting? How many slams am I getting from this one? It's, oh god. One of the things ARMS needs going forward is an actual overhaul to, like, hey, at these many targets, you hit this button. At this many targets, you hit this button. At this many targets, you hit this button. And one of the primary problems with all of those is Dreadnought. Because of the amount of damage Dreadnought is doing in AoE. Because you can see here that a single cast of Dreadnought on 5 targets is doing more damage than Mortal Strike by itself. But it's also buffing Mortal Strike. And if you have Sweeping Strikes up, you're not getting 1, you're getting 2 waves of Dreadnought. Which means this number could have been around... Let's see, you know, we just do a little test, right? Let's do a little test. Sweeping Strikes, Dreadnought. So, they all didn't crit, right? It wasn't a lot of crits. However, one cast of Overpower with Sweeping Strikes was the equivalent to about, if I had a little more crit here, would be about 400k from a single button. Compared to cleaving with Mortal Strike, cleaving with... But then once again, we have to think about martial prowess, buff and cleave, buff. It is a fucking mess. One of the... I really don't like how ARMS works, where all of our buttons have, like, modifiers on modifiers. Like, Mortal Strike has martial prowess modifier, Executioner's precision modifier, Juggernaut has execute modifier, like, Battlelord has a percent modifier. I really, really don't like the amount of modifiers that all of these buttons are getting. I would rather the buttons themselves just do good damage. I mean, that could just be it's better designed to have modifiers in the tree like this, so you feel powerful when you get these talents. But right now, ARMS AoE is a complete and utter mess, and it certainly needs to be looked at. I hope it gets looked at within the War Within, because, man... Is it a problem right now? It is not straightforward. It is confusing. It is not intuitive. And for a class built to just be swing sword good, I think it could use a little looking at. One thing they could do, I think, is straight up buff and cleave. Cleave needs to be, if you're hitting more than like 3 targets, cleave should always be your best button. Just should always be your best button. That's how good cleave should be. Because that's what it's meant to do. You're meant to cleave through targets. Mortal Strike is your single target. Cleave should be your cleave. I think Mortal Strike and Cleave should share a cooldown. And they should buff the damage of Cleave to just make it way more simpler. Because it currently does not need all of these different modifiers to mess with. It is just simply too much. It is a complete and utter mess. And that's, like I said, with me not even going into everything. Also, that's also not considering, oh, did you deep wounds everything first? Because, haha, one of the reasons why Cleave is really good is because it puts deep wounds on everything, and then that deep wounds gives you a 23% of conditional damage to the targets you're hitting, which also affects, like, here, I'll just show you, it also affects fucking deep wounds on everything, sweeping strikes, overpower. It also affects Dreadnought, it also affects overpower. Like, just putting cleave on everything before I even hit the button made overpower do over 500k now. It is a convoluted mess for something that should not be this convoluted. And it's mainly because of how Sweeping Strikes works and how Dreadnought really just throws everything for a loop because of the damage amp it provides, because of the resets it provides. And just because of the amount of damage Dreadnought is doing. And some of the keys I've done, Dreadnought was basically... Dreadnought and Overpower were my number 1 and number 2 in terms of damage in these keys, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So yeah, enough yapping about that. Please help ARMS AoE rotation. It is a complete and utter mess. Thank you.